Rob.
When it was my turn, I went to the cashier's window and handed the girl behind the counter a deposit slip and a check. While she did what cashiers usually do, I asked her to tell me the balance on my account. She pressed a few buttons on the computer, looked at the screen, wrote a few numbers on a piece of paper and pushed it across the counter to me. I took one look at it and handed it back to her. That can't be it. It's only half of what's supposed to be there. She looked at her screen again. They took out half of what was in the account yesterday. Could you check the balance in my savings account, please? And I dictated the account number to her. It was the same situation. It was exactly half of what it should have been, and the cash withdrawal had been made the previous afternoon. I stepped away from the teller's window and headed for the door when something else suddenly occurred to me. I approached the woman we had dealt with when we wanted to access my safety deposit box. There should have been 5 certificates in there, but there were only 3 in the box and all of Tony's jewelry was gone. I cleared the box and walked out of the bank. I wasn't stupid. Besides me, only my wife Tony had access to the safe deposit box and accounts. The question swirling around in my head was why my wife would want to go to the bank and withdraw half of everything we had, but in asking myself that question, I already knew the answer. The missing jewelry was a clue. Tony was either going to leave me or had already left. And I pulled out my cell phone and tried to call her at work, but was told she was taking the afternoon off to take care of some personal business, so I headed home, where hopefully some answers were waiting for me. My wife's car was parked in the driveway when I got there. I parked and entered the house, but Tony wasn't downstairs, so I climbed the stairs and walked down the hallway to the bedroom. Tony was kneeling in front of the dresser, taking things out of it and putting them in a box. I saw a few more boxes in the room, and since she obviously hadn't heard me come in, I just stood there watching her for a minute or so before I said, "Were you planning on leaving me a note, or were you just going to leave?" I saw her tense up and stop what she was doing, but she didn't turn around. After a few very long moments, she said, "I was going to tell you when you got home tonight." "Is it because of something I did?" "No, it's not about that." "Are you leaving me because of another man?" "Yes and no." "Well, that's certainly a clear answer. I'm leaving because of another man, but I'm not leaving for another man." That's even clearer than clear. And I turned around and went downstairs. 10 minutes later, she came down after me and said, "You seem to be taking it calmly." "To be honest, I expected you to be gone by the time I got here. Today, I went to the bank to make a check deposit, and just imagine my surprise when I discovered that half the money had disappeared from all of our accounts. On a sudden impulse, I looked in the safety deposit box and saw that all of your jewelry was gone, so I figured you were too. This surprised me a bit as I was not aware of any problems in our marriage, but they always say the husband is the last to know. There were no problems in our marriage, at least not through your fault. The problem was entirely mine, and tonight I was going to tell you about it. I was sure you'd kick me out of the house when I was done, so I was packing and trying to get as much stuff out of here as I could before you changed the locks." "Come on, Tony. It can't be that bad." "Oh, yes, it can. But first, before I tell you what I need to tell you, I want you to know that I love you with all my heart and soul. You mean a lot to me, and I don't want you to doubt that for a second. Human nature says you will doubt it, and I can't help it, but I do love you, always have and always will." "I never doubted it, Tony." "Yeah, but you didn't know what you were about to find out. Do you remember that Christmas party at Eric's house 3 years ago?" "How could I forget? It wasn't the highlight of my life. Eric owned the company I worked for. The party wasn't really a joyous occasion. Business was slow, there had been a few layoffs, and everyone knew there would be more. I knew I was going to lose in the next round, and I felt sorry for myself. I drank too much and passed out. I woke up the next morning with a headache and was somewhat surprised to find that I was in my bed." "I remember it," I said, even too well. "It was after you passed out and Eric had a couple of guys carry you into his office and lay you on the couch. I'd had a lot to drink too, but nowhere near as much as you, and Eric came up to me and said he was terribly sorry to lose someone as talented as you. I didn't understand what he was talking about because you never told me how bad things were at the company. I asked what he meant, and he told me about the upcoming layoffs. I started crying. We had just bought a new house and furniture, and you went out and bought a second car so I could drive it. We were up to our eyeballs in debt, but it didn't bother us because you had a great job and were making good money. I had just gotten a job, but I wasn't getting paid enough to take us out if you were out of work. I told all of this to Eric, and then he told me that it didn't have to be that way. I asked him what he meant, and he told me that he had wanted me from the moment he first saw me and that if I had sex with him, he wouldn't fire you. I was amazed that he could say that to me, a married woman, and walked away from him in annoyance. I had a couple more drinks, and then Eric came up to me and asked if I had thought about his proposal yet. Truth be told, I hadn't thought about anything else like that. I thought about losing the house and everything else we'd worked so hard for. And I thought about having sex with Eric if it kept us from losing everything. That's all it would be. Just quick sex. It wouldn't be any different than the sex I'd had with half a dozen guys before I met you. I remembered them all from time to time, but the memories of the wonderful times I'd spent with them had no effect on my love for you. So I didn't think sex with Eric would affect us. Eric would just be sex and you would be love, and you would never know. You were dead to the world, and neither Eric nor I would ever tell. I told myself that if I did, I would do it for us, to secure our future. But even as I mentally thought it through, I knew I just couldn't do it, so I told Eric I could never do that to you and left him again. A couple drinks later, he came up to me and told me the offer still stood. By then, I had convinced myself that we'd be in dire straits if you lost your job, and I hated the thought of being destitute and homeless. Oh, I know I'm over-dramatizing the situation, but I was pretty much out of it at that point and not thinking clearly. I told him that he had to promise me that you would never find out, and he promised. He promised, and then took my hand and led me to his bedroom. He told me to undress and get ready for him to come in while he ushered the other guests out. Tony. Eric walked into the room and saw me lying naked on the bed. I had to do this for Rob, but I didn't have to like it. I didn't open my eyes as Eric undressed and climbed onto the bed. I was going to let Eric do things to me his way, but I was determined that I wasn't going to like it. It was all silly talk since I had already finished a few times, but I wanted more. Much more. I stopped pretending I was only doing this to save Rob's job and preserve our way of life. Eric collapsed on top of me, and I wrapped my arms around him and kissed him. He rolled off me, but I didn't want it to end. He fucked me 3 more times that night, twice before helping me drive Rob home, and once more on my bed, with Rob passed out lying next to us half a meter away. He called me 2 days later. We met at the Hilton, and he entertained me to the point of passing out. Since then, I've slept with him 2 or 3 times a week, and once, when Rob was on a 5-day fishing trip, I spent 3 days with Eric and never once got dressed. I don't love Eric. I'm not even sure I like him, but he's like a drug to me. It was a need, and I kept coming back for him. Rob. That was 3 years ago, Tony. I never knew and probably never would have known if you hadn't told me. Why in God's name didn't you just keep quiet about it? Because there's more to it. After that first time, it never stopped. I've been seeing Eric 2 or 3 times a week ever since. You had an ongoing affair with my boss for over 3 years? I did. And yet you can stand here and tell me that you love me and that I mean so much to you. I'm sorry, Tony, but it just doesn't make sense. Eric wasn't about love, Rob. Eric was about size. I don't love Eric, and in fact, at times I can't even stand him, but I love the feeling I get. It's a purely physical act, and as corny as it sounds, it's just sex. So why now? Why this admission when I obviously had no clue? Eric has been pushing me to leave you and marry him. I seem to be the only woman who has ever been able to fully satisfy him, and he wants me to be a permanent part of his life. I've been saying no for almost a year now. Why? He obviously has what you want and what you say you need. I don't love him. I love you. I've convinced myself that I can have the best of both worlds, your love and his, and that it will work because you'll never know. I still don't understand. You were right. I didn't know and things were going well for you, so why tell me now? I wanted you to hear it from me, not him. I owe you a lot. Why did I have to hear it from him? He got tired of hearing me refuse his offer, so he decided the best way out was to let you know what was going on so you'd leave me. He figures he can take your place after the divorce, and since you'll be out of the picture, I'll have no more reason to say no. Is that what you're going to do? Marry him when things settle down? No. I don't plan on ever seeing him again. Why not? You'll be free and he'll have what you want. I'll never forgive him for keeping us apart. I know it sounds irrational. What I'm doing could destroy our marriage. But you'd never know if he hadn't decided to tell you. That, at least in my opinion, makes him responsible for destroying our marriage. I stood up and was about to leave the room, but Tony asked, "Where are you going?" "To leave you alone and let you finish packing." I saw a sad expression appear on her face and asked, "What? You thought I was just going to accept what you had to say and then say, 'It's okay, Tony, I still love you and we'll get through this'?" A girl can always hope. I'm sorry, Tony, but that's just not how I'm wired. Tony. It broke my heart to see him like that and realize it was all my fault. He strode into the visiting room with handcuffs on his wrists and shackles on his ankles. He stopped so the deputy could remove the handcuffs and then came and sat across from me. I tried to brighten the moment. Orange is not your color. The choices here are limited. To what do I owe the pleasure of seeing you? You're still my husband, Rob, at least until you're out of prison and can see a divorce lawyer. But even a divorce won't change anything. I know I screwed up big time with denial of all others, but till death do us part will always be with me. I love you to death, baby, and divorce won't change that. I'm here so we can work out our stories. I could wait until you're out on bail, but I don't know who you can talk to during that time or what you can say. What do you mean, get our stories straight? I talked to a lawyer and he said it would be better for you to point out that Eric blackmailed me, not just jumped him in a jealous rage. It wasn't a jealous attack. It was just a rather abrupt resignation. I heard that you walked into his office, he stood up, wished you good morning, and you hit him with such force that he flew backwards, hit his head on the wall, and then fell to the floor. Then you said, "Consider me resigned, you fucking asshole," and punched him in the balls half a dozen times. Is that right? No, I kicked him in the balls 11 times. They say you unzipped his fly, picked him up in your arms and carried him to the table, and then stapled him to the table. That's not true. I tried to staple him to the table, but the staples weren't long enough to go all the way through him. I tried a dozen times, but I couldn't get any of them all the way through. What did you tell the police? I didn't say anything. I'm smart enough not to say a word unless I have a lawyer. You already have a lawyer? No. I called my dad, and he's trying to get me a lawyer. I'm going to call him and tell him to stop looking. I have a lawyer for you, but he's in court right now. He'll be here as soon as he's done. My version is Eric got me drunk and raped me. He told me he videotaped it, and if I didn't keep sleeping with him, he would make sure everyone I knew saw the tape. Later, he told me that you weren't really drunk. He drugged you to keep you out of the way. I caved because I was afraid to show you the tape. Last week, he told me I'd have to start servicing some of his clients, and I refused. When he threatened me with the tape, I told him to go to hell, and then I confessed everything to you. You'll be asked why you were afraid of the rape tape. It would have shown you being forced. Because the tape would have been edited. Halfway through the rape, my body was involved, and that's the only part of the tape he showed. It would be my word against his. You do realize that if he can somehow prove otherwise, you could end up here for perjury, right? This is a chance I have to take. You're here because of me, so I have to do everything in my power to get you out. You mentioned bail. I don't have enough money to post it if it gets too high. The lawyer I hired for you said he thought he could get you released on your own recognizance. And if I don't, the bail bondsman will ask for 10% plus bail, and you won't get that 10% back. The only thing I have that I can put up as collateral is the house, and you'll have to sign that. We're not going to bring in a bail bondsman. I'll put up the full amount to get it back." "How the hell can you do that?" "I sold the cabin my folks left me. It was supposed to be my money to get out of town so I could get settled when I got home. If the bail amount doesn't exceed $137,000, I can use it." "Why are you going back there?" "I can't stay here. I can't be so close to you knowing how you feel about me. I need to increase the distance between us so I don't go crazy." Just at that moment, a deputy walked up and said our time was up. I got up and hurried out of the room so I wouldn't have to see Rob being handcuffed. Rob? That was a bit of a bummer. The lawyer showed up about half an hour after Tony left. He advised me to inform the police only that Tony had confessed to blackmail and that I understood I had no recourse against Eric, so I decided to get some personal compensation. I gave the cops a statement to that effect, and the next morning I was arraigned, bail was set at $25,000, and Tony deposited the money. She told her story to the police, and Eric, of course, said she was lying. It was going along the lines of he said, she said. And then I got lucky. 2 girls who used to work with me testified and said Eric coerced them, and when they didn't agree, he fired them. No big deal, but it was in keeping with Eric's character, and the jury might have liked it. Then my attorney said that his best friend was a reporter for a local newspaper and that his friend was thinking about doing a story on sexual harassment in the workplace. He thought it was great that he now had a local company to use in his reporting and asked if Tony would be willing to be interviewed for the piece. Eric's lawyer, my lawyer, and Tony conferred. Tony declined the interview, and suddenly the charges were dropped. The only losses in this case were my job and Eric's organ. I admit that without Tony's help, I wouldn't have succeeded, and I was grateful to her for sticking with me, but it didn't change anything in our relationship. There was absolutely no chance of undoing the damage done by her 3-year affair. I could probably get over it if she'd come clean after that party, but 3 years? No way. That and the realization that things would have continued to this day if Eric hadn't gone rogue. I could never trust Tony again after finding out what she'd been up to. However, what she did for me made our relationship possible. She didn't move back to her hometown. She bought a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town, and we see each other from time to time, mostly when she needs to party and calls me. She says there will never be another man in her life, and she'll wait for me to get over my resentment and realize we were made for each other. That will never happen. I do love her and would love to be with her, but I couldn't and won't spend the rest of my life wondering if she was faithful to me or not. No matter what she said and did to prove that she was only mine, the doubts always remained, and I just couldn't live like that.